Well, thank you all for coming. I'm really excited about our speaker today. Um, I don't know Hallie personally, but I feel like I know her because we're friends on Facebook, and that might be hard to believe, but um, know about her and her work and follow her every day along with her wife, Kel, who's here with us also. I first got acquainted with Hallie through the Spokane Homeless Coalition, and then, as I mentioned, Facebook. And then she gave a very powerful speech at an event down in Riverfront Park that was called Stop the Sweeps. And I was really drawn to her at that point. She's going to talk to us today about some of the newer things that are happening with substance use disorder and about compassionate addiction treatment, which she and Kel founded with another person who's also a relative of yours?
Yes, she's no longer with us.
Oh.
She's now working at another agency.
Okay. So they are the co-founders of Compassionate Addiction Treatment. Hallie is the executive director and is also a substance use disorder professional. She works closely with other providers at Camp Hope, so if we have questions about Camp Hope, she might be able to help us answer some of those today as well. So I'm excited and honored to introduce Hallie Burchinal for our program today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm really honored to have been invited here to speak with you all and share about the work that we do and our journey. And I think when I think about the work that we do at Compassionate Addiction Treatment, I think it's important to kind of share a short synopsis of my journey and how we came to be. I think that's really relevant to understanding the work that we do. Are you able to hear me okay? Okay. I'm not terribly comfortable with microphones, so I'm working on it. So I myself grew up in a family that had a lot of trauma. And so ACEs scores is really important to the work that we do, which is adverse childhood experiences. I have a mom who is an incredibly lovely person, and she has more adverse childhood experiences than I do. So it's really like a journey, a healing journey for families. It takes generations to overcome that. And so I grew up with a mom with high ACEs scores, who was getting through life as best she knew how, with 5 children by the time she was 24 years old. And I didn't recognize it as a child, but we were homeless off and on through my childhood. My mom would, when we were homeless, she would take us camping. We would go to state parks where there were free campgrounds. This was Southern Oregon, the Rogue Valley area. And we would stay for 2 weeks. That was how long you were allowed to stay. And then we would move to another one for 2 weeks, and then we were allowed to move back again. And so my experience during that, she did such a good job of managing our circumstances that I didn't realize until I was an adult that we had been homeless. At the age of 16, related to my own parents' struggles, my dad I didn't grow up with him. He was a Hell's Angel. My mom was forced to marry him when she was 16. And so I grew up with a mom that, I just want to honor her in every possible way, because it's really easy for people to go, oh my gosh, you grew up with that person. My mom is responsible for how I live life today. So through all of those experiences growing up, I was placed in many unsafe situations and experienced harm, but I had a mom that didn't know how to identify safety. She just was doing the best that she could. She had never been safe, so how could she possibly identify safety? And but the thing that she did that I think impacts me today, so I have an ACEs score of 9. ACEs score can be up to a 10. And when they talk about ACEs scores, they say people with an ACEs score of 3 or more are likely to not do well in life, to struggle because of all these different traumas. And it's painted as almost like a sentence that you don't get to overcome. But the reality is we can't overcome it. So, but not without community. So that's what my mom gave me. Growing up with all those traumas, she was always seeking community. And, whether it be, we moved a lot. She has dissociative personality disorder. So we moved a lot depending on where she was at in herself. And so we'd move to a hippie commune, and we'd have that community. We'd move into a church environment, and we'd have that community. No matter what environment we were moving to, the one thing that she always sought for us was community. And so regardless of all those traumas that were happening throughout my childhood, I always had supportive adults in one way or another around me as well. And I really attribute that to my ability to work my way through and get to where I'm at in life today. So at the age of 16, my mom was dealing with some significant struggles, and my young brain heard that I was getting in the way of her success. That's what my brain heard. It's not necessarily what she said, but it's what I heard. And so I thought, I don't want to be difficult, and I had a job at a fast food restaurant downtown, and I decided to go out on my own, and I got an apartment. I worked full-time and was going to high school. I was a 4.0 student. But then my management changed, and the new management didn't like little punk rock kids, and that was all of us that worked there. The previous manager loved those of us that were like struggling, kind of rough around the edges kids. And so this new manager found excuses to fire or lay each one of us off or discipline us. And I got disciplined and given 2 weeks without work. And so I lost my apartment. I was living on minimum wage as a teenager. It took every penny that I made just to pay my rent and electric and buy groceries. And so within 2 weeks, I was packing up what I could put on my back and walked out of my apartment. And there started my journey with homelessness as a young adult. And so I spent 2 years homeless, a year in Spokane and a year in Seattle. I eventually gave up on going to school. I just could not hold it together. It became survival only. It was, where am I going to eat? Where am I going to sleep? And how am I going to keep myself safe today? And that was all I could cope with. And I think, I went through my own journey out of homelessness. It's not a pretty journey. It's not one that you go, yay, that happened. The reality is that teenagers experiencing homelessness do not qualify for applying for welfare assistance. And so my only way out was a job. I got jobs while I was homeless, but my money would get stolen the moment I got paid or shortly thereafter. And so I never actually was able to get on my feet again. But I eventually, so this is hard for me to say because it's very vulnerable. Eventually, at the age of 18, I became pregnant. And once I became pregnant, I qualified for assistance. And so I was able to get a home again. And I told myself I would stay home for a year with my baby and then go to school, and I did. I went to Spokane Falls Community College, and I studied small business management. And I was able to successfully, with a lot of trial and error and living very rough, eventually able to work my way into starting my own business and becoming successful with it. I attribute that to my mom as well, because she just never stopped and she never gave up. And so she really instilled that in me. So fast forward a lot of years of healing, and actually I want to say not a lot of years of healing. Being really blunt, I stayed in survival mode for a lot of years. I moved from one trauma to the next trauma even as a young adult. I didn't recognize it at the time. I was just doing the next best thing I could think of to do. And I actually became homeless again when my daughter was a newborn. I couldn't keep my head above water. I had 3 children, ended up in a school bus up in the Okanagan on a piece of property without any basic needs other than shelter over our heads, and had to work my way back out of that. And then I stabilized again in the Okanagan, and a forest fire came through and I lost my home. and I became homeless again. And so at that point, I had a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 10-year-old, and was on a piece of property in the middle of nowhere. And that is when I discovered the casino. And I was always afraid of drugs. Not that I never tried anything during my days homeless, but I was always afraid of them. My mom had instilled that in me too. And my church, honestly, I struggle with spirituality, but my church experiences had instilled that in me as well. And so I hadn't gone down that path. And I know that had it would have been a very easy path for me to accidentally go down. Nobody told me to be afraid of casinos. So the first time I walked into one, it was just a random thing. And I actually blacked out. I blacked out and someone tapped me on the shoulder and said they were closing. And it had allowed me to check 100% out of myself and out of my life. Over time, I developed a significant addiction while I was still homeless with my children after that forest fire. I was still struggling to do the next right thing, but I wouldn't acknowledge to anybody that I was struggling with that. It was so shameful and embarrassing. People really valued me as an honest, forthright person, and I felt like if I shared with them, they would no longer value me. And so eventually I was able to relocate my children and I over to a home in the Colville area, but continued to struggle with that gambling addiction. That gambling addiction eventually led to being suicidal. And fortunately, I had a person in my life that I reached out to help when I was feeling those feelings, and they intercepted that, and I ended up at Sacred Heart Mental Health, in the mental ward at Sacred Heart, gaining the support that I needed. That was when I entered recovery. And it was hard, but I at that point couldn't hide it anymore. And so I shared with the people in my family and my life, and people started circling around me and giving me support. I was really blessed and fortunate that I had that support available to me. But because of that experience, I'm really aware that addiction does not define who you are as a person, that addiction leads you to do things that internally is not who you are. It does not align with your true self. It's given me a lot of compassion and care for other people that are struggling with addiction. So I have been in recovery since then. That was 1999. And it's hard for me to share that because now I'm an executive director of a nonprofit, and sharing that leaves me vulnerable with, will people think I'm capable of leading? Will people think I'm a worthy individual? Will people trust me? But I also know that if I'm going to work in the space that I work in and be focused on having positive impact in my community, that I have to be willing to be vulnerable and honest and open too. And I think it helps shed a light for people to see that it's not just people struggling out on the streets that struggle with addiction. It really is so many of us. And that you can't tell by looking at someone if they've been that person that struggled out on the streets. So I did my journey. I did business successfully. I raised my children, super proud of this. I went to over 24 schools growing up. My children from, my daughter from the age of kindergarten, and my middle son from 3rd grade. And my oldest son, he suffered the most due to my life struggle. But from 9th grade forward, my children went to one school. So I have one child that got to go to one school from kindergarten through 11th grade, and one from 3rd grade through graduation. I think that's one of my biggest successes in life, was figuring out how to stay put and support my family. I didn't have to run anymore, which was the mode that I grew up in. I actually did that successfully by leaving Spokane. I went to Pennsylvania, to Reading, Pennsylvania, and I lived there for 12 years, completely surrounded myself in people in recovery. I had not one single friend that wasn't in recovery. That became my life, and my survival skill was to completely immerse myself in recovery with other people in recovery. So I realized I was doing okay and maybe I could come back to Spokane. So my children and I returned. And I decided that now my daughter was graduating high school. I realized it wasn't that enjoyable to run my own business anymore, that I'd really done it so I could be present for my children and kind of have control of my own destiny and my own time. And that I wanted to do something more impactful, that I wanted to help other people, that I wanted to be present in a more complete way for myself. So I went back to school to become a substance use disorder professional. And I began working as a support staff at Isabella House, a program that is super near and dear to my heart. I fell in love with the women in that program, who were all women who were either pregnant or already had children. And walking that journey with them was, I believe I was a very positive support with them, but they gave more to me than I think I gave to them, honestly. It was incredibly healing to walk that journey, and through that, I learned a lot about myself and my own past and how I survived. So I graduated school and I went to work and discovered that working in substance use disorder treatment facilities did not align with my hopes and dreams at all. I was buried in a system that is driven by our criminal system. I was limited by how I could help people due to the enmeshment of substance use disorder treatment in the criminal system. We were really expected to hold people accountable, report every failing, and that wasn't what I was there for. It was the exact opposite of what I had hoped to be doing. And so I left that job and took a job working out on the streets of downtown Spokane, working with people who had recently overdosed on heroin. And I would visit the hospitals and meet with people that had just come in for an overdose. And what I discovered was that every single person I came into contact with was experiencing homelessness. And that job took me out on the streets into downtown Spokane, where I was at home. I was back home. That's what it felt like. I was 100% comfortable. I was in a space that I knew and understood. I knew every back alley already. It wasn't frightening for me the way lots of folks perceive it to be. And I was with people that I could completely relate with. In that process, this is where CAT happened. I was working with people that wanted help, and they would tell me they want help. There was one couple in particular, I just love them to pieces. They're still in my life today. They were struggling with a significant opioid addiction, and they truly wanted help. And I was able to navigate them in for medication-assisted treatment, which is Suboxone typically. And I watched them change literally within an hour's time of not hardly holding a conversation with me to we're sitting across the table. They met with the doctor, took the medication, and an hour later we went from no conversation and they were just crawling out of their skins due to withdrawal symptoms to sitting across from the table and eating lunch together and just talking about life. It was extraordinary to see that. Not that Suboxone is the answer for everybody. That's not my thing at all. But it was extraordinary to see, like, I suddenly got to see who they were in a short amount of time. And they asked for help. They said, we really want help. We want out of this. We want treatment. We don't want this anymore. And so we went and got an assessment. They got SUD, substance use disorder assessments, and were recommended for outpatient treatment services. So it was like, okay, we'll navigate into care. And what we found, it was so intense, and I had this was the first time it happened, but after this one incident, I ran into this repeatedly with other individuals. They were standing next to me, and I shared this story at the park too during that march. They were standing next to me saying, we want help. And the provider's standing right in front of us. And she responded to me instead of to either of them. And she said, they don't want help. And I'm like, I'm baffled, like, what do I do? And I'm like, they're right here. They're telling you they want help. And she looked right at me. She said, they don't want help. And I was, what do you say to that? And I said, they're right here. Can you please speak with them? They are telling you they want help. And she looked back at me again and she said, you know, Hallie, they came here for treatment a year ago and they chose to go camping instead of showing up for their appointments. Mind you, these are people experiencing homelessness. They were not luxury camping. They were simply out there surviving day to day. And so that was my first experience with hearing, you know, you hear out in the community, people talk about homelessness and they say they don't want help. I can tell you firsthand that is completely inaccurate. And it's a story told so strongly that even when two individuals are standing there vocalizing and advocating for themselves, saying they want help, the provider still hears that they don't want help. So after experiencing that numerous times, I realized there was a massive gap in care for people experiencing homelessness, and started talking with the people in my inner circle, my direct support system, about it, and started formulating a plan. And that is actually how CAT came to be. So it's based not only on my lived experience homeless, it's also based on walking through what I walked through with other people experiencing homelessness. And then it's also based on evidence-based best practices. And I think it's important to say that because CAT gets a rep for doing things outside of the box. We truly are doing evidence-based best practices. So there's an agency called SAMHSA that does a lot of research and guidance. We follow SAMHSA's tip for working with people experiencing mental health disorders who are homeless. And that is how we do the work that we do. It's very trauma-informed. It's about meeting people. You hear the words meeting them where they're at. It's used a lot. We truly meet people where they're at. So, and that leads into, it leads into so much. So it's about harm reduction, which is a controversial topic in Spokane still. We get a lot of flack because we do things from the approach of harm reduction, but harm reduction is about that meeting people exactly where they're at. So if someone is still actively using, there's no shame, no blame, no judgment. It's how can I be here for you right now? What can I do to help you make it as safely through the day as possible? What are you comfortable with doing to make it more safely through the day as possible? You know, would you like to go to the needle exchange and exchange your dirty needles for clean needles? Because now you're at least going to have a better chance of not dying today. And that's what harm reduction is. So it starts at that very base level, and I think that's where people get caught up in that's awful. You're giving them clean needles and saying it's okay to use. But that's not what harm reduction is. You're not saying, hey, it's okay to use. It's saying, you're not ready to stop yet. I hear you. I want to help you in whatever way I can to make it. Because you're not going to enter recovery if you're dead. And that is what harm reduction is all about. So we decided to build a model that is not anywhere else in the U.S. We found one place over in the UK that's somewhat similar. We decided to create a day program that's zero barrier. And by zero barrier, it's if you're using, that's okay. You can't use on property, but if you're using, that's okay. That's where you're at. We love you. If you're thinking about recovery, curious about recovery, in recovery, in and out of recovery, or just want a hot cup of coffee, please come in. And what we thought would happen has happened. So when you're out there homeless, there's no reason to trust anybody. In fact, there's every reason to not trust anybody, especially people that work within systems. You know, you go to the hospital and you're just here drug seeking. You're just, you know, we actually walked through a journey with someone. Actually, this has happened multiple times at the ER. They have a serious health concern going on. In fact, it happened to one of our staff members who is fully in recovery in the last 2 months. You're just here drug seeking. And our staff member who's fully in recovery was sent home and almost died. She became septic. Her appendix had burst. but she's beautifully tattooed and she's larger than life. And they made assumptions, and she was sent home literally to die. So this is something we experience a lot. So people who are out there in homelessness have developed every reason to be really hesitant to reach out for help. It's incredibly painful to be turned away. It's incredibly painful to be judged as not worthy of basic human, just all the basic things that those of us who are housed take for granted. And so we decided we're about removing barriers to care. And the first barrier to care is trust. And the second barrier to care is hope. And so if we can build this day program, and which we named Recovery Community, if we can build this program and welcome people in and give a safe space to be throughout the day, supported by peer counselors who are people that have walked through it too, then maybe, just maybe, people will trust us enough to let us help them more. And it works. So I'd love to share a quick story. And I'm not going to give you any identifying information because I'm really serious about people's anonymity and not being used for our gain. And it's a hard balancing act to walk because we're a nonprofit who relies on community help, but we will not give our people up to our community as a basis for bringing that in, if that makes sense. We really value and honor each person that we work with, and we have true relationships with the people we work with. We really are family together. So we have an individual who came into CAT in the first month that we opened. We had opened prior to opening, we were opening October 1st of 2019. Last week of September 2019, a very unexpected snowstorm happened that was extreme and outrageously cold. So it was well ahead of its time. So we realized, and actually it's my mom that pointed this out, you have space, why aren't you using it? And I was like, oh my God, I can't, I didn't think of that. And so we opened up as an emergency warming shelter, and we partnered with another boots on the ground nonprofit, Jules Helping Hands, to help because we did not have, there were 4 of us at CAT as the opening crew. We ended up with 138 people in 3,500 square foot building with the city's approval because it was such an extreme situation. And so that happened the week before we opened. We opened our doors on October 1st, 2019, and because we'd been an emergency warming shelter, nobody understood what the heck we were doing. Everybody was coming in, aren't you a shelter, and like unrolling their bedrolls and making camp, and we had to walk a long, hard road to like educate our community members experiencing homelessness about what we were about. And we did our best to do it with absolute respect and care, but it was a process because we did start out as an emergency warming shelter. We've since been an emergency warming shelter every year that we've been open. And we've been an emergency cooling shelter as well every year that we've been open. So this individual came in, they had been at our emergency warming shelter. They came back because it was a place to go. And when I would talk with them, they would, say, I'm not interested in any of that recovery crap that you're doing. Pardon my language, because I'm very straight. Not here for that. I just want a cup of coffee. And I would say, awesome, here's a cup of coffee. Would you like some lunch? And we provide lunch, but is just from out in our community. We rely on our community to help us provide a meal a day. And they would welcome that, and then we'd be like, can you clean up after yourself? No. It just attitude every which way. And it was like, okay, well, we do have a recovery community agreement, which is something that we do. I think it's really beautiful, which you sign, and it says we take care of this space. So if you're not willing to help take care of this space today, I have to ask you to leave, but I hope you come back tomorrow. And so just really like having to hold some level of minimizing the intensity of this space, like holding people to, we at least have to take care of this space, no violence, no threats of violence. That's like our basic, just our ground level work. And this person kept coming back and kept coming back and kept coming back. And then I noticed they're sitting over there in the recovery meeting. They didn't leave. And, you know, I asked them, like, oh, you decided to join the recovery meeting, which was led by a peer counselor. And they're like, well, it's better than me. I didn't want to go outside. Oh, okay, that's beautiful, dude. That's awesome. So time went on. By that spring, so this was October 2019, by that spring 2020, we're deep in the pandemic. We're the only place open in downtown Spokane providing face-to-face services. We're inundated with, all the food places have closed, all the places that serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Only other thing open are the shelters, which were full, no beds available. So we become this bizarre community hub, serving meals in the parking lot, doing all this crazy stuff while hoping we don't all die, because that's what it sounded. It was a lot. It was a lot. And so March of pandemics, like, we're in the scariest part of it. We're all hearing about it. They were outside with their significant other, and they were fighting. And I walked over because I'm wanting to dissipate it because it was getting a little intense. And what they were fighting about was, he was angry that she had bought meth. They were quitting. Didn't she understand that? And that's the first I'd heard. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. So I was like, so we don't allow meth pipes in front of our building. And I was like, you know, what are we going to do here? She's like, well, I actually want to stop too. I was like, I'm down for it. So we went out in the middle of 2nd Avenue and we smashed the meth pipe. That's a day at CAT. It's we are down in it, in it. And so that person, they are no longer together doing their own journeys. That person from that day forward, by their choice, this isn't by saying, hey, you need treatment, you must do this, you must do that. That person at that point in time made a personal choice for themselves that they wanted to do recovery, which is the most meaningful entry to recovery. You know, it's very much aligned with what they want. And it was a long road, you know, experiencing homelessness. I remember they came in one day and they were like, someone tried to throw me off the cliff last night while I was sleeping. This is a very real part of homelessness. And so so we talked about that, like, that was really stressful. That's scary. Like, someone tried to really harm you. Are you interested in learning some other ways to cope with that, like, really brutal crud? And so that's what recovery is about. So I talked about ACEs scores. I talked about their impact on us. I talked about my own gambling addiction. So addiction is oftentimes a coping skill for all that trauma and all those things you've experienced in life. And when we say coping skill, it really is. So it's a coping skill that comes back and really kicks you in the butt. And now you've found a way to escape the pain, but now the thing that helped you escape the pain is causing you more pain. And so what we do within our work is we use a program called Seeking Safety, which is all about trauma and addiction and how to recover. And so we work on identifying new coping skills to replace the use of substances. And so that's what this person started working on. They identified, I really need to work on my anger response. And so, okay, let's work on coping skills for anger response. I need to work on building healthy relationships. Okay, let's do that. So it's very person-driven, like, what do you need to work on? How can we support you? And then we've got the tools to do that work. So this person also could not imagine themselves living in a home. They had been, when we met them in 2019, they've been homeless for 20 years. And so 2022, 23 years homeless. They moved into an apartment in the valley in September. I feel like we're actually learning so much through this person. They share so openly with us, like what they're feeling, what's going on in their head, like what's that really like. And I knew already from my own experience and from, education and so forth, that getting housed is hard. I used to, when I first got housed, I would go grocery shopping and I would put the food in my fridge. Mind you, I'm pregnant. I need to be eating, right? I would put the food in my fridge. I wouldn't eat it because I wanted it to still be there the next day. So I didn't want to run out. And it just this thinking, your thinking gets really warped when you've got those survival issues going on. So this person was like, I am not comfortable in a house. Like, I have not been in a house in all this time. Take the keys back. They contacted one of Lakota, one of our peer counselors, on the weekend. Take the keys back. I don't want them. I don't want to be here. This is awful. I hate it. And Lakota went and met with them and was like, hey, how about you keep the keys, you walk out the door, you lock it, and you can do whatever you want. You don't have to come back until you're ready. And it hadn't even occurred to them that they didn't have to do anything, that they could just have an apartment. And so last week this person reported, Hallie, I have stayed in the apartment 4 nights in a row. And it was just high fives from all of us. Like, how amazing is that you stayed in the apartment 4 nights in a row? Comes in, I took 4 showers yesterday. And what a glorious feeling to be able to do that. And so through this work with CAT, so we really built things as we were running. And that's the reality. We built it as we were running. And COVID hit, and we had to run faster and harder. But the process has been all about feedback from the people that are coming into CAT and hearing, what is your experience, what do you need, and does it look like? And so we recognize that the first step is building trust and hope. The second step is supporting people in whatever recovery looks like for them, and that's whatever recovery looks like to them. And then when we talk about housing, the final step is walking that full journey with a person. It's not, you got housed, yay, we're done. Got that done, win, and let the whole community know they're housed, we're good. It's, you're housed, what do you need next? Do you need help figuring out how to clean your house? Do you need help figuring what cleaning supplies to get? If you've been homeless for 23 years and you walk into a store to get cleaning supplies, oh my gosh, that's so much. Like, just those little things that we take for granted. And we know that to support people in truly getting to the life that they dream of, we've got to walk that whole journey until they are to that life they dream of, and provide support in a way that is comfortable and right for them. And part of that journey too is teaching people how to advocate for themselves. We can't be advocating for people and then say we're done and walk away and leave them advocating for themselves if they haven't learned how to advocate for themselves. So that's what we're about. What time are we at? Yeah, what time are we at? Okay, I would like to play this video, and then for me, I do best if people ask me questions, because the work that we do, it's so many different directions. We're doing recovery community, we're doing housing case management, we're doing employment case management, we're doing medication-assisted treatment with volunteer providers. We're doing all these different things, and it's hard to encompass all of that. And so I would love to play this video that Rogue Heart Media did for us. We received a grant from Empire Health Foundation to create some videos to help change the conversation within our community. This one's geared towards CAT. The ones coming out, pardon me, that we're working on right now aren't geared directly towards CAT. They're geared at just the stories of recovery. But this is one that I'd love to share, and then just love to have a conversation. I would like to see this next year enter for the first time since 2016, for us to enter into the winter season with adequate shelter for the people in need. The challenges that the people I know have faced are so deep and so heartrending. I want to see them in a safe space. I want to see them able to access the mental health care that they so much deserve and want. I want to see them able to build a supportive community in order to make those steps forward, I just know that we can all do better, and I think this is the moment to do it. What I wish people knew is that the one thing we're missing when we're homeless is community. And the one thing that everybody could do to help someone out of homelessness is to reach out to create that community connection. And it's really that simple.
How you doing? Hi, Hallie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Did I see you down at
What I say is, hey, have you ever heard of compassion addiction treatment? And some people are like, treatment, And I'm like, but listen, it's not like other treatment centers. You don't have to be in recovery to be here. You don't have to be seeing an STD counselor and be an IOP to be here. If anything, just come hang out with me. Come hang out with me and have a donut and have some breakfast. We could paint. We go on bike rides sometimes, It's just a place for a little bit of normalcy. And then pretty soon they're clean. We have people here that have been homeless for 10, 15 years, and they're clean. And they still pack up their tent every day when they leave here, and they go camp out, and they come right back here, and the next thing is housing for them, right? But that's blows my mind. They still are in recovery out there on those streets.
And we don't just help get our people housing and jobs and income. We help them maintain that housing, maintain that income. A lot of times when people are experiencing homelessness and they've been chronically homeless for years and years and years, they don't know how to maintain their housing, right? They don't know how to communicate with their landlord. They don't know how to, just normal everyday life skills, So that's where we come in to help support them.
The magic happens daily. When they first came in and they were no hope, no love, no support, no anything, and then to see them looking at me going, wow, look how far I've come. It makes this job unbelievable, unbelievably gratifying. Everything feels so good right now. I can't imagine doing anything else.
Here at CAT, we're like a family. We all have our own individual strengths, but together we make CAT work.
Some people look out here and they just see a mess or, dirty, but it's just pain. It's out all in this block. It's just a bunch of pain. Nobody's in love with being out on this block. We really just fight it with our hearts, and our willingness to be there to help them just put one foot in front of the other, because that's really the point of everywhere in life. You just got to keep going.
It's important that the community sees that recovery is real, because I'm recovery and I'm real. 3 years ago, I was an IV user. I was homeless, living out of the back of my truck. And today I have almost 3 years clean. So I'm proof that recovery is real.
And most of the time, there's so much more to that story. A human being that has been through so many incredible things, good, bad, and otherwise, that deserves to be acknowledged as a human being. And adding shame on top of that pain does not help anything, and it makes it that much harder to actually reach out and get support and help. I was terrified to get into inpatient or anything to do with recovery. I felt like, oh no, the whole world's gonna see that. I can't go into inpatient, that's such a shameful thing. But it turns out that was the best thing I've ever done in my life. And I wish they had taught all of the tools that I now know in recovery at kindergarten. It's just not talked about and it's not known, and we need to break the stigmas, change the conversation, and lift each other up and be there to support each other, whether it's a smile or a hand up in one way or another.
I don't ever wish anybody to know what it's like to be addicted to something. Some people know what it's like. Some people have loved somebody who knows what it's like. Leaving addiction, there's way more components than just not using.
We've got several people that are now employed. We've got people that have graduated. We got people that are housed. Like, it's hard to describe. It's just such an amazing experience getting to watch that every day.
Hope is what gives that inspiration to make it through today, clean and sober. Worry about today, right?
That's exactly what people experiencing homelessness need. They need those conversations and to be able to walk away going, I can do this. I've got a goal, I've got a trajectory, I've got dreams, and I'm capable of attaining them. But that really comes from that community connection, from that conversation with another individual that sparks that feeling. And I think that's the one thing we can all do.
I can't believe that I was there. And I can't believe that when I was there, I never thought I would be here. I didn't think this was ever gonna happen, you know? I am a powerful woman in recovery. You can do it too. Yeah.
So I would love to open this up to questions regarding the work we do. We're also at Camp Hope, and I know that's a hot topic right now, so if you have questions about Camp Hope, I'm also willing to answer those as well. Yes?
It's my understanding that families are not at Camp Hope. Is that correct? They're diverted to Family Promise or some children. Yeah.
That is correct, yes. There are no families with children at Camp Hope. There are families at Camp Hope, but none of them are under the age of 18.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I know we've got one gentleman there who's very elderly. He's a vet with a Purple Heart, and his son with really painful, untreated mental health is there with him as well.
Was that a picture of Rosie O'Donnell in one of those pictures?
Yes, it was.
Did you guys meet up with Rosie O'Donnell?
Who?
Rosie.
Oh, yeah.
Rosie O'Donnell here in Spokane?
Yeah, she was here in Spokane. She's actually dating someone in Spokane, and yeah, they're connected to recovery, and she wore one of our hoodies.
Do you work with the Housing Authority?
The Spokane Housing Authority?
Yes.
We do to some extent. Like they have vouchers for Section 8 housing, and I know we just applied for, did a combination, a collaborative request for housing vouchers, Compassion Addiction Treatment, Jules Helping Hands, Revive, and Spokane Low Income Housing Consortium altogether applied for 80 of those to use with people currently at Camp Hope. Yeah.
I know they, to be honest with you, I have a daughter that works there.
Uh-huh.
And she has cued me a lot about the homeless
Yeah.
situation, and it's a difficult situation, let's just put it that way.
It is a very difficult situation with a lot of layers to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just was wondering if, when I was hearing all this, you said housing case management,
Yeah.
I was thinking of that program.
Yeah. Yeah. So we work with them in any capacity that we can. Yeah.
Okay, well,
And I'm glad your daughter's doing that important work. Thank you to her.
yes, she is. I thought of that.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yes.
Homelessness isn't new to Spokane, but what does seem new is much greater attention to this issue, and it's becoming a very hot button issue. If you were made supreme dictator and given powers to solve or address the homelessness problem, what would be your first steps?
What would be my first steps if I were supreme dictator to solve and could solve problems? That's a really good question. My first step, if I had that overreaching power, would be to pull the community in for a conversation and educate everybody about the realities of homelessness in order to bring everybody to the table with compassion and empathy. That'd be the first thing.
And we've seen that in Family Promise, you know, because the families there have those wraparound services that become their community.
Mm-hmm.
And their success rate it's phenomenal.
It is actually.
So when I look at our guests, you know, at Shalom, you know, and it is, you know, I've just encountered a couple of people there, you know, in the past years that we've been there. You know, we haven't seen them for a while, and then they come and they say, "Where have you been?" "Well, I got home. I have an apartment," you know, and it's great. But it is those, yeah, you can't just move people into a house and then forget them.
Yep. That's very much the truth. I know actually, and I can say this because she's done lots of interviews and things for Family Promise in the last few months, but Sandy Monk, who was in the video, when she began working for a cat, she was still living at Family Promise with her infant, and Family Promise has helped her in beautiful, extraordinary ways to become housed and unite her family back together with her. So she's one of the successes. They've interviewed her, like, I think she's been interviewed 5 times in the last 2 months for that, so she's been very public about that, otherwise I wouldn't share it. Yeah. And I think Family Promise does a beautiful job. I think they are uniquely capable of doing that because people care about children. And it's really hard to pull people into a conversation that's about adults only. There's just not as much empathy there. People think it's all about bad choices, and it's not. You know, lots of folks end up homeless that weren't struggling with addiction, and addiction comes as a coping mechanism to the situation, and then it becomes its own beast that is now holding you down and pulling you back. But yes, it is. It's really hard to engage those conversations.
I just wanted to share, I may not have heard it correctly, that Shalom serves 4 breakfasts to continuously through COVID, through the state. They did not close.
I think.
And the goal there is not to fix, but to feed.
Yeah.
Here's some food, here's some respect, fidelity.
Yeah. I think there may have been a short time period there where Shalom was closed, because I know there was a period, and I'm not trying to be difficult, I know there was a period of time there, and it's a big fuzzy thing now because we were just plowing through so much. But I think that during that initial COVID phase when it was super scary, there was a closure there, and then it started, I know our world started evening back out. We weren't even able to keep track of who was open and who was closed anymore. I know we were open for 9 months through COVID when it turned out that they were having all these big COVID meetings amongst the providers for people experiencing homelessness, and nobody had reached out to us at all. And then someone walked into our building from within that group that was meeting together, and they were like, "You're open?" And we're like, "Yes." We didn't know that. And so they were all having all these wonderful virtual meetings while we were just down in it, unsupported. And at that point, they did come in and they started bringing us sack lunches and stuff for us to hand out. It was a hard time. It was just, we were so new that people didn't know much about us. It just, the timing of it was all really intense. So I'm so grateful to Shalom. I know you all are a place that meant the majority of people that we work with also go to Shalom. Yeah, and they're beautiful people. So grateful for all that you do. Thank you.
As a volunteer at Shalom right now, it feels like we have those people who have been clients or diners for a number of years even, who are continuing to come back, and some I think are probably housed now but come back for meals. But we're also seeing a lot of new faces, a lot of young faces, and a lot more violence, I think, right now. We're seeing an awful lot of violence, fights and having to call the police and having those conversations, hard conversations right now.
Yeah. I think, and Kel, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've kind of seen a little bit of an uptick to folks, I would say, struggling more. And so emotions are escalating more than they have in the past. And I have to wonder how much of that is connected to the political energy that's surrounding it all. You know, I didn't experience that when I was homeless. It wasn't being taught. We just weren't even talked about, let alone being hammered with all this negative, these negative statements. And I just can't even imagine if that was coming at me while I was homeless. I already felt so less than and so unworthy. So I have to wonder how much of that plays into that.
I think a lot.
I think so too.
I think since COVID hit and a lot of the counseling services went virtual, I know Frontier has changed their program a little bit, so they don't work with the people that they used to work with. And obviously with COVID, a lot of people struggled mentally, and so our housed community are getting those services, and there's less services available for our unhoused community, who also struggled tremendously during COVID with the lack of connection and the lack of services. And so I think that, and now the way they're being treated and the light that's being shown on them through the media, and a lot of them see and hear what the media is saying.
Yeah, very much so.
So I think it all has played a role in the violence. Mental health is severely deteriorated in some folks. They're being treated so poorly. They don't know if they're going to be staying at Camp Hope for however long. And I think all of that has played a role, and it's just increased the violence because they just don't know how to cope.
Yeah.
Not being political, but you have to figure out what people that are running for office actually have done. I know, and I know I might be thrown out of here.
Yeah.
But Patty Murray, I know, has done a lot.
Yeah, I know for oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And so, in a way, I hope she's reelected.
Yeah.
She has done a lot for the community.
Yeah. I know for compassionate addiction treatment, one of the things that we've been finding our way through is, you know, when we decided we were going to do this work, we didn't realize that we were stepping into a political hotbed. We just wanted to help people. And it has been hard. So we were actually, we've become public about it recently. We were actually served with, by the police with a notice that we've been identified as a potential chronic neighborhood nuisance. We were served that in June. We were fortunate that we have a board member with good ties, Ben Stucker, with good ties to the community. And so Jeffrey Feiner came on board as a lawyer immediately. And we were required to, pardon me, I have allergies. We were required to set up a meeting with the city within 10 days, and Jeffrey reached out to them to set that up. So this was delivered to us in June. We're now in October. We've actually never had that meeting with the city. They refused. They just, once they thought that they'd found a small nonprofit that couldn't stand up for themselves, and so it appears once we had a lawyer that is well known within the city, they just kind of gave up. But it was really scary for us. It was like, here we are doing all this hard work. And I could tell you, a year ago, had I come and spoke to you, I would be standing here with so much more energy and really hyped up about it. I'm exhausted. I am exhausted. Our team is exhausted. We do hard work, and we do it in a very compassionate way. And the politics of everything is dragging us down horrifically. We're doing our best to ignore politics and just keep focusing on our work. But it's really hard, and especially being part of this project out at Camp Hope, it's becoming increasingly hard. Yes.
Capacity issues. I mean, everybody has a certain amount of capacity that they can deal with, and
right.
then they have to try to find another spot. And,
yeah.
You know, it seems like the city's solution to this is to open up an institutional kind of situation. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I have huge thoughts on that. I actually was on the Continuum of Care Board when the Trent shelter was being discussed, and Jules Helping Hands had created a RFP for that, but it wasn't actually for the Trent shelter. It was an alternate RFP to show what a collaborative RFP could look like. We knew that it wouldn't be taken seriously because it didn't meet criteria, but a number of service providers decided they would sign on to this collaborative RFP to show what we could do if the city were to empower us to do it. And because it was immediately moved off the table because it didn't meet criteria for the Trent RFP, and which is what we knew would happen. But because CAT was tied to that RFP that wasn't being looked at all, when I spoke up about the Trent shelter and shared my very strong thoughts and opinions on it, Nadine actually announced that myself and Ben Stucker were conflict of interest, that we were involved purely for financial gain. And that actually impacted me at a state level, and when I was meeting on work regarding how to untwine substance use disorder treatment from the criminal justice system, I actually got confronted in that meeting at a state level regarding what was my motivation. So I have since resigned from the COC board. I didn't realize it was a political situation I'd gotten into when I agreed to be on it. So I'm learning a lot. I'm not a politician. I'm learning to identify where politics are happening and to step to the side, because I truly am, I'm going to say what I think, and I'm going to say what I mean, and I'm going to do it every time. And sometimes that has backlash that I don't understand is there until it happens.
You were attacked by Lee Woodward?
I was announced in a press release as a conflict of interest. Yeah.
I think it's very exciting that you're doing harm reduction. That is a whole new way of viewing how to work with addiction. And there's somebody at Catholic Charities who's doing that. They may one of the advisors inside the housing units, and that is such an unusual way to think about this, and I think it's just very exciting.
Thank you. We actually have 4 volunteer medical providers at CAT who do our MAP program. We wouldn't have a MAP program without them because we can't afford a medical provider. They're expensive. But we're really grateful to have 4 individuals that Dr. Maynor, Stacy Maynor, ARMP, Dr. Lemberger, and Dr. Kincaid all volunteer their time every single week at CAT. 3 of them have done it for over 2 years now, which is almost 3 years. Almost 3 years. It's incredible. Yeah.
Where does your funding come from?
So that's a really good question. So we do a lot of work for free. We were able to bill Medicaid for IOP-OP, which is outpatient services for people working on recovery. We're able to bill Medicaid for that. We cannot bill Medicare. Medicare does not pay for that service. We provide it to people on Medicare at the same level we provide it to people on Medicaid. We do it for free. We do the same thing with our MAP program, the Medication Assisted Treatment Program. People on Medicaid and Medicare, we can submit billing for that. If they don't have either, we do it for free. Recovery Community, our day program, we cannot bill for. We do that completely for free. So we are working to build a good financial support system within Spokane for those free services. I think that's the most important work we do, truthfully. We've been really fortunate to get some good help along the way. This year I applied for a grant from the state called the Uninsured and Underinsured Expansion Grant. And so we received, now CAT didn't receive this, we received this to use. So we were awarded $475,000 to provide services for people uninsured and underinsured, but those services aren't just services within CAT. This is the most amazing grant. We can pay for people to go get their dentures done here. We can pay for people to get whatever healthcare treatment they need there. So it's really actually the bulk of those funds are going to go out into the community to help pay for needs. To answer your question regarding our funding, we just run skinny. We run skinny. We are still working to be able to provide medical and dental benefits to all of our team. We don't have that yet. We have to watch carefully to make sure our team doesn't burn out. Our mission is removing barriers to care, which means not turning people away for any reason, and we're committed to that. So that's the journey we're walking. We know that COVID really got in the way of allowing us to share our work with everybody and to build up those collaborations with community members for financial resources. But things just keep happening in the right way. We recently moved, so the video showed that we moved into this beautiful historic brick building at 168 South Division Street. We're directly behind two of the Housing First apartment complexes. And we had previously, so we started out in a 3,500 square foot building. COVID hit. We moved into a 15,000 square foot building on First Avenue to accommodate the surge in need. And we ended up with a neighbor that was very unhealthy and scary for us. It was another hard journey in the midst of doing really hard work. And then we had a wonderful person step in, Kevin Rudine of Rudine Development out in the Valley, who lost his son in 2016 to a fentanyl overdose. Is really caring and passionate about this work. And so he actually stepped forward and bought the building we moved into for us to move into it. And then his goal is to sell it to us. And he said if CAT, because we're still a young nonprofit, he said if CAT can't get financing, then I'll co-sign for you to buy it from me. And then he is gifting us $150,000 in equity in the building as well. So we just keep kind of having the next right person in our path. And I feel like that's just proof that we're doing the work we're all meant to do. The next right person just keeps being there. I hope that answered your question okay.
You indicated you need food. What kind of food?
So we need a lunch each day. Right now, my mom serves lunch every Tuesday. We had multiple people providing lunches through COVID, but they eventually got exhausted and fell away. So our team just works really hard every day to come up with something. But we are in desperate need of an 11 o'clock meal that can be anything from a sack lunch to something warm, and warm is always nice. We do have the ability to heat things up. We have a kitchen in the building. It's small, but we can reheat things in the oven. The fire marshal approved us for using it as long as we don't cook with grease, because we don't have the, yeah.
And how many diners?
It is an average, oh gosh, this is hard, 30 to 50 a day. It fluctuates. Yeah, it very much fluctuates in the winter more than in the summer, for sure. But yeah, 30 to 50 a day.
Is the new location, is it bigger than the old one?
It's actually smaller. It's right in between the size of our first one and our second one. So it's about 8,000 square feet. It's a historic building. On the historic registry, it was the original dairy creamery for downtown Spokane. So it's all brick walls and exposed beams. It's beautiful. And our people experiencing homelessness deserve to be in a space that's beautiful. It's really uplifting to be in a special space.
How much smaller is it from the old location?
So it's about 7,000 square feet smaller. However, the old location, we had not been using all of the spaces. So this one is serving us just right. It's got room for us to add 4 more offices. It's serving us just right. Yeah.
So at the old location, you guys, it was bigger, but you guys didn't fill up the building.
Right, we didn't use all of the spaces. Yeah.
This one is just one that's just as big as the organization itself, but you have room for 4 more offices.
Yes. Yeah, we're actually becoming co-occurring right now. We have an ad out to hire a mental health counselor. So we'll be doing substance use disorder treatment and mental health treatment at the same time.
I was just wondering if you approached any of the grocery stores.
We have, yes. We have. We get donuts every week from Donut Parade. Stores like to give a lot of carbs. That's to be really honest with you. I know you've experienced, I'm sure Shalom is well aware of that too. Carbs tends to be the thing that's donated. And so we're constantly looking for proteins and things like that.
Fresh fruit.
Fresh fruit, oh my gosh. And things that are soft enough to eat when you have teeth that are not healthy. Yeah, we give out a lot of candy. People withdrawing from heroin or meth rely on sugar as a way to get through those moments. It helps to hit the brain receptors in a similar manner. So we're always in need of great quantities of candy. Harm reduction, when you think about cigarettes and candy, it's like those aren't healthy for you. However, maybe they're not so bad as heroin and meth. So we keep those things available.
Well, I was just thinking, the reason I asked, my son worked at Fred Meyer, did you ever approach them?
I don't know, because we've grown so much that I'm no longer down in the thick of some of that work, so I'm not sure. Yeah.
I'll try again. Thank you, Hallie and Cal, for being with us and bringing us up to speed on what's happening with your organization. Really proud of all that you're doing, especially the harm reduction piece. That's awesome. So, thank you for coming, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.